I have no intro. When I was thinking about talking to you, I wanted to cover the history for one, so we can do that maybe to start. But I wanted to maybe for the conversational part, get into like the hey, we're not just crazy loons saying the same thing over and over again, although we are we are saying the same thing over and over again. But I always wondered that, like when you would text me something and you would sometimes you'd say something and I'd read it and I'd forget about it, and then you say that same thing about 4 months later, and then
Right.
maybe 6 months later you say that same thing again. and and you're very gently, I think, hey Jay, can you get this through your thick skull? That's how I get, because I'm like, yeah, he said that a year ago. He said it 6 times. And it's like you're patient enough to say it to me enough until I finally get it. But
That's funny is because in my guitar learning, it's from some of the uh, I never had a formal training or anything,
yeah,
but would ask fellow guitar players that I knew along the way that were decent, and they would teach me things, and I had no idea what they were talking about, but the year or two down the road when I finally ran into that space, I'm like, oh, that's what he was saying. Makes perfect sense now. You know what I mean? And that happened multiple times in my learning, in theory and in just learning songs and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Just it was it had to be beat into my head.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
That's the point, is to get it in there, because then it's in there. When it gets unlocked, or comes to fruition, that's when it happens. You know what I mean? But at least you got to get it, because if you never get it in your head, then you'll never know.
Part of me
You know?
thinks like you do have to hear it 4 times before you get it, because otherwise it's just maybe something you thought of in passing, but without it being
Well,
something.
right. You're exactly right. And there's something to that and they say that, you
Yeah.
write it down on paper, you know what I mean? And because if you write it down, then it does something inside of your brain where you memorize it, it becomes imprinted or whatever. And back in my day in school, when you screwed up, you had to go to the chalkboard and write, I will not talk in class 100 times. And and becoming an adult and thinking about it, well, they need to go back to that, because that taught me not to talk in class, you know what I mean, or not interrupt the teacher, or whatever it is you're writing. You
That's
know,
bad.
it got imprinted in your head finally.
Something that feel cruel and unusual now looking back. You're like, oh, there was some psychology to it going.
Right, exactly.
Oh man. So taking that into the Obel context, I figured that was a humorous way to open it up, because Obel is one of those things that like you I mean maybe it's tied with buffer, but they are sort of hand in hand. But it may be the most frequently asked Jerry Tone question, do you think?
It can be, because a lot of people don't understand the concept of it. A lot of people understand the effects loop, and we kind of created the Obel name, the onboard effects loop name,
Yeah.
but putting it in the context of a guitar throws people off.
Okay.
Like, well, how do you know what I mean? You got the, like you were talking about, the effects loop on an amp.
Yeah.
People understand that
I think,
effects loop on a mixer. People understand that,
yep.
but put it on the guitar, they don't. It takes them off into another world. They're like, I don't know. I'm not messing with that. I'm not gonna ruin my guitar installing another jack, putting a battery and a buffer in it.
Yeah, there's a lot that it entails. I think it'd be cool to start with two sort of ideas here. Is one, the question I think in its most simplified form is people sort of incorrectly use the term output jacks, but I get it all the time. Hey, why does your guitar have two output jacks? And I'd love for
Mm-hmm.
sort of rewind us to, I guess, I mean, is 76 a safe place to say this is when the invention happened? Would you tell us the story of how?
Yeah, 76 would probably be the beginning of searching for it.
Okay.
You know, because he's starting to want to use effects, and he's used them in the past. He's trying to find a way to incorporate it within his style and playing.
Yeah.
76 would be that year. You can hear the Mutrons played in both up and down modes inside of there. In the wall, you can hear the fuzz,
Yep.
the Morley fuzz wah. You know, before that, it was just the wah. You know, there may have been some phaser use in studio and stuff like that.
Yep.
We do see phasers with the piano,
Yep.
phase 100 with the piano, and with and Bobby in 75. So we know pedals were around.
Yeah.
You know, they were in that atmosphere, but you weren't hearing him in an everyday content. You know, what would you call it in his rig as a staple of his rig. You know, he would change out the fuzz, or not the fuzz, but the wah. But
Was there a
getting to effects, he was looking for something.
like in 74, maybe I remember you sending me a China doll
The Morley fuzz wah.
wall solo. So he was trying that out as early as 74.
Yep,
I didn't realize it
yep.
was around until 76 though.
It's actually on the Europe 74 when they took the Wall of Sound to Europe. It's on the manifest, the Morley Fuzzwa.
Oh my God.
So I mean, you could see it on stage, but I mean that kind of cements that it was there.
It was there. That's awesome.
And
So I'm thinking about like I'm trying to approach this from the average guitar user, and not that Jerry was at all the average guitar user, but he was a guitar player, so he encountered all the same things that we've probably encountered as guitar players, if not more, because he's just
right.
doing it more on the road. But where do you think his head's at? To me, I'm thinking as a guitar player, if I'm using a phaser and I turn down my volume knob or whatever, that doesn't really change the response of that pedal too much. Uh, the fuzz would be something I'm sure you're experimenting with different tones when you change the volume, but uh, 76 is the first year that he has effects that are pretty heavily controlled by how much volume is being sent to them. Is that a safe way?
Well, yeah, the Mutrons come into the atmosphere with them around that time, and those are voltage sensitive
Thank you.
devices.
Yeah.
Um, but what triggered the onboard effects loop was the fact that these pedals also, with their impedance mismatches or matches or whatever the case was, according to Healy, um, was that it was altering his pickup sound.
Thank you.
So being straight in line like a regular stock guitar player, he noticed right away that it was altering his clean pickup sound that he was good known for.
Yeah.
So he heard that difference when the pedal was bypassed, because there wasn't a lot of true bypass pedals at that time.
It's
So he heard that, and that was what forged him to start looking for another way,
amazing.
you know.
So
And that's where the effects loop comes into play.
I think that's
Uh,
one of the places where people sometimes get lost from the, well, why would I do this approach is, well, look at every other guitar player who's used effects. Uh, was it not good enough for them to play? I like,
right,
why was Jerry not bothered by that, but found that to be a problem? Whereas you look at traditionally in guitar world, in rock and roll world, a lot of the sort of lossiness is a factor in the tone.
right.
Its approach is distinct in that there's sort of this preservation mindset. I- Do you think that sorry, the math behind it is that these pedals are changing the where the pickup actually the frequency response itself, right? It's
Correct,
resonant.
correct.
Okay, so
Right.
yeah, I guess it leads back to Jerry's. desire for a really consistent guitar rig at the core of it? What do you think is the
Well, yeah, he was the effects weren't you don't get till he solves the problem. You don't get the estimated profit where the Neutron's on the entire song. You
Yes.
know, he was clean the whole time he was playing prior to the effects being incorporated. I mean, dancing in the streets with the envelope, up or down, whichever one it is. The whole song wasn't if you listen to the clean version, it's very much the same thing, but boy, does it sound really good with the Mutron on it, you know,
Yeah.
versus versus what he was doing with I think it was the Travis Bean 1000 bridge pickup at that time.
Yeah.
Um, clean. Um, there's some he didn't get it exactly right the first time either because he didn't have the ability to he did have the ability to completely bypass it, just wasn't a switch on the guitar. With the 500s, the switch was on a network box that he had on the floor that the OBL cable, the stereo cable sent and return plugged into that, and then it went out to the effects back into that box and then back up to the guitar. And that box had a foot switch that bypassed everything if you needed it.
That's amazing. And so they
Yeah.
basically and not invented true bypass, but they recognized the need for a true bypass system really early.
Right. And that's the origin of his effects loop switcher.
Yeah,
They discovered something in that search of creating the OBL. They discovered the true bypass needed for each effect
that's awesome.
to bypass them. And that comes along when Tiger in 79, August of 79. So you're talking OBL, the end of 76, actually 77 to August of 79. You're 2 years, maybe even less than 2 years. Is it 77? All of 77, all of 78. Yeah. So two and a half, quarter year, 2 and 3/4 years before the effect switching system becomes a mainstay in his rig as well.
And prior to that, was it was looped, pedals looped together or in a single chain or
Yeah, it was a standard single chain. But there was a net box, which was the controller, and it also had the ability to power some effects
amazing.
because the Mutrons were plug-in wall effects, but the MXRs weren't. The MXR delay was too. It had a wall plug-in transformer internally. His phase 100 and his distortion plus. If they didn't use batteries, they plugged into the network box as well. So um, yeah. So the network box was where the cable came in, and you can kind of see in some pictures that I found. I've shown. I don't know if I pointed it out before, but you can see the OBL cable goes up towards the mic stand, but his mono goes back to the amp. So
Wow.
you can see it split on stage. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Yeah. So
That makes me
um,
smile because of the hubbub usage in our community, and that is the thing that I tell people. Well, you don't have to have one, but it's really nice because it keeps you from being tethered to two different places. And there's
right, exactly. So he was tethered to two different places for a portion of the time
wow.
with that. But Healy did say that network box had a single true bypass, so he could bypass the effects with that network box.
Yeah,
You know,
fantastic.
um,
It seems like
right,
their approach to that is the same sort of thought process as the knob lock accessories they sell today. It's like people are annoyed by effects pedals because you kick them, you move the knob. They are very inconsistent. And it's a funny complaint to have, but yeah, how many times have you been at a gig and you got to bend down and you got to fiddle with something on your pedals because it's not how you left it last. I feel like
right.
point about Jerry not bringing in the effects on these songs until he got them consistent enough to sound recognizable night to night. it, it,
Uh-huh.
it would have been tough to try to dial in a Mutron envelope filter tone. And if your action pickup height is set the wrong way and you're losing some signal on the treble strings, oh no, now I'm like that would just totally throw you off your game of trying to be present and improvise with the music uh
Right.
organically night to night. So anyway, I think about how cool it is that they just were like, all right, well, this doesn't work. Let's try to fix it. Um,
Yeah, right.
so early on. But I guess I'd love to talk from there, like the optimization of Opal. I don't know if we know the answer um, exactly of what the question. It seems logical that if it works so well to preserve the signal with a buffer on in a network box at the floor, why not move it to the guitar? But what do you think sort of brought us there?
It's up for debate. These they don't like Healy. Healy. I don't want to speak for him, but he's told me that it was all the buffer was always on the guitar.
Okay.
But we find that the TB 500s don't have a buffer, and they have no indication or sign that there was a buffer and a battery inside of them.
Thoroughly studied.
Right. Now, knowing that the guitar is wired so that it actually functions when you don't have a wire in or cable inside of the OBL jack,
Yeah.
that it functions as a stock guitar
Yeah.
with a stock volume, 250K volume on it. So it's a stock guitar.
Yeah.
The length of cable with the built-in cable to go from the guitar to the network box, whether it be 15, 20 feet, would have been no different than sounding, no different sounding with the OBL now on there than in 76 when he's playing just the TB 500 with a cable 15 or 20 feet going straight to the amp.
Yes.
There, those sounds, those two tones of sound, those two guitars sound pretty much the same.
Yeah.
So, in theory, you don't have to have the buffer in the guitar as long as you got it in the network box. It's almost as if the network box could quasi be the amplifier that he was once plugging the number 11 into. That length of cable from there to the box is the only thing that is passive now.
Yep.
Now it hits the buffer inside of there and then goes to the out to the send to the input of the effects chain and then out of the through the effects, then back out into the return, back up the other side of that cable, and it's all buffered at that point. So now all that cabling has been being line driven, um, and the impedance is flipped for low to high, so none you don't get the low end loss or the high end loss from the capacitance and the resistance of the cable mingling with each other. So that's in its essence is the same thing because he has the we know he has the foot switch bypass on the network box as well.
Yeah.
Where I believe, and in my studies of this, where when the OBL or the not the OBL, the buffer ends up on the guitar is when the OBL bypass switch ends up on Wolf.
Which is the date? I forget. It's 70.
It's it's in the middle of is it 78? I think I want to say the summer of 78 when the switch comes on there. It's when it's still single coil.
Yeah, okay.
When the SDSs are still on there, um, the switch shows up on Wolf.
Is it?
And I believe that's when it becomes because Wolf also has the necessary OBL 14B stereo switching jack that has both a switch on the send and a switch on the return that allow you to use the guitar in the TB 500 state, where if you don't have something in the OBL jack, it's a stock passive guitar.
Yep.
It still functions as a guitar. You can plug it in to an amp and you still get a great tone out of it, still all that stuff. That remnant is still in Wolf. With the switch on the guitar, you don't need that jack.
Of course. Yeah.
You can use it and if you have nothing in, then I think people have discovered that it's almost an on-off kind of. You can do that. What you call it? Where the effects are, you
Kill
can turn
switch.
it off. Kill switch. There, that's what I'm looking for.
I've
It,
found
you know what
on my own guitars, I never liked sending them back to people, and then when they were using them traditionally, if they accidentally hit their oboe on, it
Uh-huh.
kills the signal. And so I always felt a little weird explaining that to them. And so I took the idea from the early oboe stuff,
Right.
took that switching jack and just made a little loop on it. Um, and then also connected it with a bypass switch so that bypass switch is effectively disabled and works either way and doesn't operate as a kill switch. Just a little
Correct.
side note. I think I've texted you that before, but I've
Yeah. You have, and others have done that. Not many, but it's you when you're using the OBL notes, so most of the time you're using that jack, so it's not something that comes up. It's only when the listener should know that that kill switch is only when you don't have anything in that OBL jack. You have that ability as a kill switch now because the other side doesn't have the effects to go to. It's just going to kill that signal.
so, but you're saying
The
both there to this day there was the remnant of both the bypass switch was added, but they still kept the 14.
But they kept a 14B, and Wolf is the only one like that.
Interesting.
Tiger doesn't get it; it just gets a regular stereo jack. Rosebud just gets a regular stereo. So it has those guitars have that kill switch ability if you only use the regular jack, the mono jack, not the nothing plugged into the stereo jack.
That's really good evidence based on, to me, here in Wolf, based on Wolf delivery and what we know about the timeline versus Tiger
Right,
delivery in 79, that by the time Tiger's delivered, the buffer has definitely entered the guitar realm, or
correct.
maybe that's the first time it's on the guitar, but probably not because they've already added the bypass switch to Wolf. And they want
Correct. And that theory is solely mine. I've tried to kick it out of them with anybody, but it's not
to say,
and their memories aren't as well. They've had a lot of other influences that were going on in their world, but
you got a
um
order on that theory from me. I think it's really well thought out. Like anybody that's watching this can sit and sort of put those pieces together, and it makes good sense that by so
right. And then when you actually try it out like I've done
yeah,
with my Squire.
yeah,
I've done it. This is a 14B jack. This is a stock Squire.
mate.
And I have a network box on mine with the buffer in there, and it sounds beautiful. And you hit the bypass switch, or you go straight um passive into you can hear the difference what the buffer is actually doing to the signal.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. God,
so yeah, actually, what I did on my network box, which has the so it's tethered in one spot, has the mono through like the hubbub
cool.
for the mono through, but the it has the OBL that comes in, but I put a switch so I can toggle the buffer in and out
Brilliant.
because if I want to use this guitar, I obviously need the buffer. If I want to use this guitar that has a buffer, I don't need to use the buffer in there, so I can toggle the buffer off and still have everything tethered to that OBL.
I can't wait to pick a guitar to do that too. Every time I experiment, I'm about like 8 months to a year behind, and then I feel like I excitedly start texting you like, "Oh, everything
Right, right, right.
is true."
Yeah, and it works. I mean, we're basing this on theory that this is how it would happen, but the fact that it works
Good.
kind of lend is good evidence. Right, exactly.
I I'm trying to think. So I mean, that's a pretty great, super nerdy dive into sort of the history of it. I don't know how much. I guess in my video, I'll probably end up talking about the pretty simple, like, let me educate you like you're five on this. But I'm wondering if we hit a couple minutes on like the super simple uh how to think of it, or that's what I was going to talk about. Why we need buffer in oboe, and like why people get those confused. Um
As the same thing, or yeah, the buffer is not the oboe.
so
It's a part of it's a needed device to allow the oboe to do what it does.
yes, thank you.
Let's go back to what Jerry was the one that thought of this idea, and then he took this idea that he had to Healy,
Yeah.
and Healy got a hold of it and did his schematic or however he designed it. Realized that we need to put a buffer in here because you're going to add cable length. And remember the idea was that the effects mess with his clean signal. We've got to mitigate that situation. Healy had to mitigate that situation, and what they did is they used a source follower, a JFET buffer. It's a source follower which is slightly less than Unity. Um, if you put it on an oscilloscope or a function, not a function generator, a network analyzer, you'll see that it's not Unity. It's damn close to Unity. There's no reason not to use it. You would only be able to tell if you A/B'd it in certain ways, but the need for a buffer was Healy's idea.
Amazing.
Because it of the added the cable length, as we discussed, we're going from now we have the passive 15-foot to the box,
Yep.
but now we're going to end up going from a cable which could be as short as 2 feet, I guess, to the effects. All the little cables that connect the cable, all the effects together. Then another 2 or 5 foot, whatever it could be, to the box.
Yeah.
Now it's got to send up to the guitar and then back out of the guitar.
Another 30 feet by the time.
Another 30, right? So now you're adding all that resistance that's inside of a cable. As you by the foot, you can look at cables; they measure so much, and the tiniest amount of capacitance will now create a low pass filter. Yeah, it allows it'll reduce the high end.
Yeah.
So the high end will get reduced. What a buffer does is the standard guitar is your pickups are high pass or high impedance. The buffer changes that high impedance to a low impedance.
Yep.
In layman's terms, in tried to break it down into so people can understand the high. It's the guitar pickup. It has a really high resistance, and we're changing the output to a really low resistance. Now, what changing it to the real low resistance does is the math with the capacitance of that cable doesn't make it where it mingles and creates a low pass filter. It's basically invisible now. So the cable is that what happens technically it's like you can plug the guitar directly into the amplifier.
Yep.
That's what we're doing now with the buffer.
Yeah.
We're eliminating that filter that's created with any guitar player. I mean, Jimmy used a curly cable and knew that was creating some sort of phenomenon with his, and what it was doing is that curly cables are known to have high resistance or high capacitance, I should say, not resistance. The guitar is the high resistance, had a certain amount of capacitance in it that created some sort of filter that he liked in his sound. I just learned recently. There's a YouTube video or a meme or whatever with Carlos Santana that he uses a specific Canare cable at a specific 50 feet to create the sound that he wants stock. He uses that cable and that because of its specific capacitance at a certain feet to create what he wants for that filter.
That's pretty.
That's creative.
Canary is known for being like a low capacitance kind of a Belden style, right?
Right, right, but
And a
exactly.
way crazy length. So he's
Mhm.
going extreme on either end.
Right, and has done the math that they needed to know that when they make Carlos another cable, it's going to be this model of Canary, and it's going to be at this length, so that they get the exact capacitance they want, because that's what Carlos wants.
I think that's stuff that we don't as a greater guitar community, we don't pay enough attention to. You know, I don't. I
You
have
know, a lot of people just go by brand, Canary, Belden, or this brand is way better. Or this guy makes the best cables. But it's really a mathematical equation.
equation. I think that's a really cool point that gets overlooked a lot. That's awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Right.
and it's subjective too. It's everybody has their own
Correct.
they like.
Correct.
Carlos
Ex-
Santana's approaches and Jimmy's was completely different from this Jerry, as I like to use the word ethos, you know,
right.
preserve every bit of the content of the note versus yeah, let's screw with it on its way to get, amplified some more.
Yep. Yep. And so that was why the buffer was put into place, so that they, because you know with alligator, for instance, we've discovered the 1 meg volume pot
Yeah,
with the Belden cable, um that were pretty much 20 or 30 feet, if you want to put it out there, for 72. There's the sound.
yeah,
There's, even if you were to use Alnico 5s versus Alnico 3s, which I believe were in there, the 54 pickups would have been Alnico 3.
yeah.
um that's going to make that gritty, that tone that he got out of that guitar,
It's awesome.
you know.
And if you've tried it, I'm saying that's awesome having tried it, but I remember hearing it and I know it's a distinct feeling when you're like, oh yeah, but I don't know. But when you plug it in and you get to experience the the effect is real and it's not the same as, oh, this gold plated cable is better quality. It is it's just an equation and you can't really
Uh-huh.
change the law of that. It
R-
works.
right, and that's where the buffer comes into play, so that he can get that tone from his pickups unaffected, and through several pedals
Yeah,
back to that amplifier, um
as
and then
consistently as possible night after.
right, right,
Yeah.
right. So, um there's the part in estimated that he gets into, um in the middle part, where he's going. I don't know if you can hear that. Can you hear that?
Trying.
Trying to describe the part that in that section of the song, he's actually flipping from Mutron to straight signal, clean signal. He's using I don't know if he's using the Mutron or if he's using the bypass switch on the floor, but he's using it later on when he in Tiger and stuff. You can see him actually doing it with the OBL switch.
That's awesome.
That's a hard thing to do, to play that. Let me put down, that the Mutron.
After, would you send me a video or I can maybe,
Yeah,
'cause I can't get the audio too well here. Let me try.
yeah, I can send you the video of them doing it, and I think there's a 77 estimated where you can see him looking down and hitting the switch.
That's
You
awesome.
know,
I think I
but what he's doing, I don't know if you're going to be able to use it, but you can hear that he's flipping in there. He's flipping back and forth between clean and Mutron. And if you were to do that with just a straight signal, you would have a hard time keeping those volumes of the clean volume and the affected volume consistent
Totally.
enough to be able to perform that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's what the OBL allowed him to do, things like that.
I
You know,
think the power of the switch on the guitar uh is slept on a little bit because
yeah,
it's just awesome not having to stomp on a beat because that's always made me feel a little silly. It's like, oh, I'm dancing with my pedals right now, and you can kind of just keep you got your A sound and your B sound, and it's
right.
reasonably easy to incorporate that.
And that I think a lot of times I know it was for me. The light bulb went off. Like there's not one guitar that I'm not gonna have that isn't gonna have that ability anymore.
Yeah.
I got to have that now.
You and I
You
both,
know.
I couldn't live without it after about 2 months. I think the hardest part for me was getting used to, hey, I don't turn pedals on with my feet anymore. I'm gonna try to commit to using this switch. And that took
Hmm.
a few months to really get used to. And then also the volume, it wasn't the taper, but maybe it's a little bit the taper difference because going from a traditional guitar, you get really used to that 250K or the 500K taper, and
Hmm.
it's similar um, with a 10K, but I felt like I was because my amp had to be set louder because I wanted to be able to play softer um, at louder moments in a band. I would throw my volume up to 10 and play
Right.
and scare myself because it's so damn loud. So I think
Right.
it took a while to make my new 10, which was the default. I had to get used to that being around 6.5 or whatever.
Right. Right.
And so,
Yeah. The volume control is there. The with the beans when he first did it was 250K,
yeah,
but you have to remember the 200 the volume pot is a resistance in setting the output impedance of the guitar as well. Like we was discussing, the pickups are high impedance, and naturally the guitar volume control is high impedance with either a 250K or 500K volume pot. Now, when he used the 10K or 25K,
yeah,
well, 25K first, then moved to the 10K, those also were they become low impedance pots now,
yeah.
because the other side of the buffer is low impedance, so that's why we want to maintain a lower impedance with the 25 or 10K. But with the Travis Beans when he first was doing the OBLs, um maintained a 250K pot,
Yeah. Which
and it works. And
obedience.
it works, but it's changing the impedance of that cable from to that last run out of the volume control to the amp to high impedance again.
Yeah. So
So there was some tweaking that had to happen, and it may have worked well with the very bright Travis Bean pickups and guitar, because then he's not losing the high end as much, so it may have worked in that aspect. And I don't know if like we were saying, that Wolf had the remnants of it could have had the 250K. We'll never know at first, because it was wired identical to the Travis Beans when it comes back. It just has Fender or the DiMarzio FS1s in it.
you're dropping some
Um,
nuggets here, man. I've never.
right. So it at some point they moved to the 25K, which I'm almost, in my theory, is when that switch arrives and the buffer gets put on the guitar, the bypass switch is there. Now they've changed the output pot to a 25K to give them more brightness out of that OBL. It wasn't okay. I Jerry dreamed up the OBL and poof, it was magically there. This worked out in stages,
Yeah.
and to where it became, and it even changes later from a 25K to a 10K
And the
in Tiger at some point,
yep. When's the
and so Rosebud would have it too, to 10K as well.
when was the switch from Belden to Kinnear? Do you remember?
There's no telling when the switch from Belden to Canary is, but I believe that that's the reason why they went from the 25 to the 10K because the Kinnair had a little bit more capacitance than a Belden did.
So they needed to essentially.
So they did attenuate, yeah, change the impedance, the resistance of the cable.
This is like, oh God, this is nirvana. It's so cool to hear. Oh my God. Well, I've thought about the impedance of the volume knob so much, and I knew you had a pretty good understanding of what you believed the timeline to be, but I had never heard all of the evidence sort of presented one after another. It makes perfect sense to me that,
Right. Well, the Modulus Black Knife, the backup to Tiger, is a great um tool to your what a specimen
yeah,
to look at because it's virtually untouched from when it was used in 85.
yeah.
And it has the 10K. So Kinnair must have been changed somewhere around that time or a little bit before that time, you know.
Well, yeah,
Um,
you've almost seen it enough to pick up on patterns of like, yeah, when the guitars go to the shop, it's not like they're just getting a tune up. A lot of times they're getting the results of the feedback that Jerry's now learned with them over the last 2 years or 3 years or whatever. It's like, hey, I think I,
right. It's probably more of Healy saying I want him
yeah,
to, to with the brighter Super Twos, they probably might have been the reason why they went to the Kinnair to give a little bit more low end out of that. Well, we know they did that with the buffers because they changed the output impedance of the buffers
yeah,
to match the pickups to get the resonant peak or the curve they wanted out of the pickups.
it's remarkable.
Um,
I just wonder, I know it's not something we could have the answer to, but how cool to hear because I think of Healy as almost a translator and verify, like he could take if Jerry had an idea of, hey, I want this on a guitar. Because Jerry, from what I know, didn't have the electronics knowledge to say, hey, can we swap to a 10K? But I bet he absolutely had the vocabulary to express to Healy. It's saggier, or I wonder what
right.
conversations were like.
Right, and it doesn't necessarily mean it was actually Healy doing the work. Healy was just in charge, the head man. That
Point.
Healy had guy, yeah. Healy had Ramrod and Cutler underneath him that he could assign duties to, and Cutler was one of the guys wiring up Jerry's guitars, definitely for sure. He did Tiger. He didn't do Wolf, but he did. At some point Healy had a little bit more on his plate doing something else
Yeah.
where he could dish that off.
Not doing the early grit and
Right. But I'm sure that all passes with him being front of house and him having a great knowledge of the individual musicians' sound and what they were doing, whether he liked Bobby or not.
yeah, it was
He could only work with what they were giving him, and he could help them, with mic placement and all the other stuff, but he could also help say, hey man, why don't you try this? Or, let's try that.
that's
And if you didn't want to do it, then they didn't want to do it. But he was there for them to bat ideas off of with his knowledge, being a good guitar player himself, he knew what was coming, what was to be expected.
how cool to be not just a sound. Yeah, because that's something I think that's a not to knock sound engineers now, but I do think one of the drawbacks of the modern sound engineer school of thought and philosophy that gets taught nowadays, it seems, is no noise on stage. And I've always admired that Healy seemed to be being a musician himself, like he he was okay with the noise, like he worked with that well. uh
Right.
he made it, he's sort of as beautiful as it could possibly be. And I think a
Uh,
lot of times I see bands now and it feels lifeless because there's really nothing coming from the stage.
yeah, I asked him about that before, and specifically about Jerry's level that he played at and the noise potentials. Did he use any EQ or anything like that? I believe he used a limiter Healy didn't like the EQ, but he used the limiter on pretty much whatever needed a limiter.
Cool.
But I remember what he told me about Jerry's balls to the wall.
Wow.
He let Jerry. That's how Jerry could do whatever he wanted. He didn't need to touch Jerry's fader once it was set. You know, because Jerry had the dynamic control to be the musician he was on stage with his volume control and the setup that he had designed, that they had designed.
Together. Yeah. Wow. Well, that's just about the best way to explain it, I think.
Yeah,
Ball.
and he did, and a lot of people like to bum on Healy about Bob Weir and him playing with Bob Weir, and he did play with Bob Weir's vocals, but as far as his guitar sound,
Yeah.
it was Bob Weir that was always changing his gear, was always using this, was trying that, was doing, whether he was not wanting to listen to Healy or not, but once presented with whatever it was that Weir was putting, Healy could only work with that. So if he's a little less present in the mix or a little bit more present in the mix, that it's because of what was being given to him,
I, I
you know?
nicest compliment that has ever come my way that for me was the proof because I was experimenting with Opal early on and kind of insecure about like, hey, my amp, I want to be loud at moments. My amp is going to be loud. I'm never going to spike your microphones, but sometimes I need to finger pick while the drummer is slamming on the drums. And
Uh,
and so I was always sort of very like, hey, I'm not going to fatigue you guys, but I will have a couple moments where it sounds like my amp comes up real loud. Don't like grab the fader and turn it down. I sort of tried to convey that to sound folks. And somebody had a show and it was me and there was another guitarist and he had a lot of effects and he had on and off effects that would send the amp to the roof. And he, after the show, came to me and he said it was his favorite guitar tone he had ever heard and that he did not have to touch my fader all night. And I think it was a reference to he was having to jerk the other fader all around.
right, right. Uh,
You don't know when the boost comes on, it's going to go crazy. But
well,
I was in control of that. And
well,
so,
that's one thing that a lot of people, I've tried to help Josh Okins, one of the musicians that I help with, and it's stuff that I've learned from Healy. You'll never see a 57 on any of their amps.
yeah,
And there's a reason why. The reason why, and I see people put 57. There was just a concert in the band show I just seen with Alligator and a Twin, and they've got a 57 on it. And I'm sure there's JBLs in the Twin.
yeah,
A 57 has a 97 dB, I believe. I'm not going off paper. 97 dB limit.
yeah.
So if a mixer or front of house is putting a 57 on your JBL, you can guarantee he's going to be telling you to turn down all night long
Because you're so
because your speaker is 103 decibels. Even with when you turn it down, it's 103 decibels. It goes with distance from the speakers as the decibels go down. So if your microphone is right on the speaker and you got a 97 limit and 103 pushing, you're gonna be he's gonna be slamming his meter all night, telling you're too loud. You don't know how to take control. No, you don't understand the math that's supposed to be going on. That's why the microphones that he used could handle the sound pressure levels of that speaker. And he did once he can set it, they can let the guitar player play,
that is a great
and
yes.
so at the front of house guys, they do. Some of them prefer an F50. I've had them put 57s on mine.
Yeah.
And the only thing I can do is just go to the master volume on my amp and turn it almost where I barely can hear myself on stage because that's the only solution I can give him with a JBL.
I
If he doesn't understand that he has a limit on his microphone, it's his house. I'm not gonna mess with. You know what I mean? I got to be the nice guy, so
yeah, I
we're gonna just have to play that way.
I've two comments on that. I encountered it last night, and it was super friendly and casual situation. And I saw the 57 go up, and it was a difference in. I carry a Beta 57 around
Uh huh.
as a non MD 421 option, and I haven't actually checked the sensitivity on it, but it seems like it handles a JBL like at least a okay uh,
Right.
to a stock. But I saw the stock 57 go on the amp, and I didn't even know we were micing amps, and my other mic was in its case, and I was like, let's give it a shot. And just from the reflections of the other monitors off the walls, because I didn't have any in my monitor mix, but the other guys listening to my guitar, all of a sudden I found myself, I was picking really hard all night, and it's because I had to back my amp volume down
Right.
because all of a sudden, like if I got too loud, it was unpleasant
Right.
to listen to.
And I'm not saying at 57 you can't use that as an amp. What I'm saying is that the two worlds are the math isn't correct.
If
And the
you have
57
creamed out,
you can play with the 57, but the minute I throw on the distortion and turn my guitar volume up to hit a thing, I'm gonna peg his meter, and
and
he's gonna be, you're too loud.
yep,
You know?
exactly. And it's about that. I always think of it in the most simplified form as think about the country bar band that comes in and the dude's got his 412 half stack. And
Uh-huh.
the problem with that is that oftentimes they are too loud because they turn the amp up to 10, they turn the guitar, or not 10, but 6,
Right.
guitar volume up to 10, and then they're slamming on the guitar all night. Of course it's going to be too loud. You're like, I have a tolerance for distortion. I get fatigued after a while. It's square wave
Uh-huh.
in our ears. And
Right.
I think it totally changes the game for you as a performer and your relationship with the sound folks in whatever it is, that bar that night, the theater that night, when you go in and you have a really, they will recognize that you know what the fuck's happening when you say,
Uh-huh.
hey, I'm going to give you my max, make sure I don't clip your board, couple strums, don't scare them, and then come down,
Right.
do your sound check, do at the normal playing volume. I have had nothing but like wonderful feedback and nicer relationships than I ever did when I played with a guitar on 10 and used a compressor to make it as flat as possible. Just like, hey, can you give us less sometimes?
Right, right. I've gone down to just one JBL with my band.
Yeah,
Not only because there's no need to have two or three on stage if the other band members don't complement the same way,
yeah,
they're not playing with the same volume, then you shouldn't be using that volume. So I went down to one, but the fact that I have a JBL,
it's plenty.
it's still 103 decibel, and the microphone's going right on it. You know, if you have a 412 with Celestians,
Yeah.
you might get away with it a little bit more because Celestians, I believe, are around 97
Oh,
pressure, sound pressure levels. So, you're just being too loud on stage, and that's a whole nother world, you know?
yeah, I think it's fun to remember at the end of the day, like we are talking about ways that you can be louder at moments and cleaner at moments, and but it's at
Uh-huh.
that's the key word. Like we're not trying.
Right.
It would just hurt everyone if you
Right.
to their extreme night after night, all show.
Right. Right.
As a really good closer, 5 minutes on how this can be applied outside of the context of Grateful Dead music, outside of the context of recreating Jerry's tone. We could start and say, hey, you can apply this just by, having a bypass switch on your guitar. You can apply that kind of um, that aspect of this whole system to your band, and you could play metal music. You could play whatever genre.
Well, I think there's one he's no longer with us, one big guy that I think would have, had he been, coaxed into using it,
Yeah.
the OBL would have been Kurt Cobain. The
Wow.
way he structured his songs with the clean to the fuzz or clean to the phaser, he
Yeah.
only used a couple pedals on there, but the way he wrote songs and flipping between the two, he wouldn't have had to look for a pedal. He
Oh,
wouldn't have had to make sure he hit when the song comes, he knows it's going to be chorus is going to be, it's going to be the rough stuff and a phaser maybe on it, turn it on, and then start off with his clean stuff, and then right when he gets to the chorus, just throw the switch. He
that's
could have been anywhere on the stage to do it. but that kind of writing, works with the OBL.
I 100% use it that way. I just keep an overdrive on, and it's kind of just, it's my reload. Instead of having an onboard overdrive on your guitar, I just, I use my switch like that. That's a great
Right.
point. I was seeing in our nerd forum the other day somebody asking for the Obel blend information.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I wanted to touch on that. People ask a lot of times with Jerry's tone, "Hey, it's this really cool." They hear about the onboard effects loop, and I think what happens is people hear he did something interesting with his effects loop. His sound, when he has a distorted tone because of the way the JBLs compress, it sounds remarkably clean, and so I think
Uh-huh.
they hear Obel clean and kind of dirty sound. And a lot of people ask me, did he have a blend?
Uh-huh.
Do you think that that's
Right.
why that sort of gets spread around as maybe a myth to his?
I do, and the reason why I think that is because his clean sound when he hit the effects loop on was so present to the effect that people almost subliminally hear the cleanness of that effect coming from that pedal's wide open, or that
Never
the
hear.
pickups are wide open
Yeah,
to that pedal.
yeah,
And you can't do that in a stock situation.
of
You
course.
know what I mean? So I mean, you could, but you would have to have the volume pedal. There's other ways to quasi make the OBL work in a stock situation.
Yep,
But the way Jerry did it, um, and people trying to replicate it, almost believe that that's got to be what's going on with some sort of blend, because I can't do it.
of course. And
I can't get it. So
per
there's got to be something else that's going on,
yeah,
that, you know what I mean? But no, it's
per-
simply the OBL and the effect that it creates.
that's a brilliant point too.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and every other guitarist you've ever heard turn on a tube screamer is not going to have that sound because they are going to be using a stock guitar with a 15-foot cable hitting the tube screamer, and you've lost all of the frequencies that in Jerry's signal, it's it's the only thing that sounds like that is a drive pedal, but it's amplifying all the frequencies.
Right, right, exactly. So I mean, people are the same guy with the tube stream goes to the next venue and has to play at a different volume level, so the voltage of going to that tube screamer is now different from the night before that he just used it, and now he hates the tube screamer.
Now the
He wants to use something else.
yeah, yeah, brilliant. I think maybe last point with Future of Obel, um, the the one con, I no longer see it as a con, but I have heard people are very reluctant to give up their lossy, but I like the gain control. You see where I'm leading here?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
The time I've ever received pushback is people that are so, well, no, I'm an avid volume rider. I've spent my whole life on a stock guitar learning how to get the perfect tone with my pedals between 7 and 9. I don't
Uh-huh.
actually believe there's that many people like that out there, but I have encountered those folks who are like, no way I could give up pre-pedal gain option. To that, my answer is, well, you could always wire up a pot if you wanted that's a pre-volume pot and a post-volume pot if you wanted to incorporate it still. But I wanted to maybe do that long ago, and I decided, thanks to your advice, to not worry about it. And now I use the splits, the splits or the parallel or the voicing switch to
Right,
change how much gain is being sent to that pedal. Do you
correct.
think that that's why those split switches were so crucial to Jerry because he didn't have the ability to alter other than his right hand?
That's a great observation. I couldn't say for sure because I don't speak for Jerry, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's giving him two options, two voltage options to send to that pedal in that regard. but here's what I would say to a guy that approached me that wanted me to help him with his rig achieve what you were saying.
Yeah.
And I would tell him that then you would want to use the Travis Bean wiring because then you could have a 250K volume control just as if it was stock hitting your mono and you put the tube screamer on the mono side in between the amp and the guitar, and now you have the best of both worlds.
Yes, that is a great point is to remember. Yes, you can absolutely put stuff after your oboe loop. I
Right after the volume control, and it would have the correct high impedance that that pedal wants to see that you would still be wanting the stock version of. You would have trouble with the 10K and 25K. The fuzzes don't like those.
yeah,
But you could use a fuzz pedal, and a fuzz pedal is a great one to talk about where voltage gain of the volume control affects what you're going to get out of it.
very
You
sensitive
know,
response to
right.
that.
So you could use that type of wiring, and still get buzz. You still have the OBL effects loop, and you still have a traditional inline to the amp effects loop or effects chain, I guess.
That's really interesting. Yeah, brilliant. And I'm going back now to 70 when you're saying the bypass switch comes in, and I'm thinking about that's during single coils, but as soon as he goes to the bypass switch, when do we see the humbuckers come in? That's fall of 78, right? So
Yep,
I,
yep. Not too far after the switch.
I'm
No, it's not too
wondering
far after.
that humbucker with the multiple options comes in specifically because of the Opel need to have at least some sort of option to change that voltage being set.
Correct, correct, correct. And then a lot of people don't know that or don't realize that, and he used it in quite as an effect that the tone control of slamming it all bass when you have a dirty pedal on,
Yeah.
and then the pedal creating its own high end and its own different sound as well
Yep, because
on
you're
top of it.
getting the resonant peak.
Right,
Yeah,
correct. That gives him another option with the dirt pedal
I love it.
that most people didn't have.
I think I Obel might be able to save the world, at least the guitar world. Mike, it's
Yeah,
a pleasure talking to you as always. Thanks for
yeah,
studying
no problem.
so long and sharing it with all of us, and I know we're all very grateful for you.
Yeah, I love y'all.